In video number 7, I'll introduce the remaining parts of the strategic planning process. We've already talked about the vision statement, the destination. Now we'll look at the mission that defines the path to that destination. We'll look at goals, issues, roadblocks, things that will help us follow the plan. If the vision is the sunrise between mountain peaks, the mission is the path that takes you to that sunrise. It's a consistent set of actions that will take you where you want to go. The mission describes what you will do to move closer to your vision each day. If, for example, your vision is to be known for kindness and integrity, your mission might be to treat people with kindness each day and never take an unfair advantage. If your vision is to be the richest person in town, your mission might include looking for profitable investments, making shrewd deals, and spending as little as you can on luxuries. Whatever your vision, the mission is simply the statement of what will take you there. It's a path, not a goal. The mission isn't a goal, it's a mode of action. The mission describes the actions and attitudes that you will adopt and is not defined in terms of goals or results. Goals are extremely important, but they don't fit here. We'll get back to goals in due time. Right now, we're describing the path that, if followed, will take you closer to your vision each day with every step. The vision statement is a guide, but not a complete one. The mission statement is a consistent guide, but it lacks detail. When you have defined your mission, you may feel disappointed because it doesn't give you all you need, but don't worry about that. We're not done yet. The mechanics of writing a mission statement are similar to writing the vision statement. Imagine that you're back at that same banquet, the one being given at some time in the future to honor you. Dinner is over, and the main speaker welcomes the guests. He begins to describe what you have done. He tells of your actions, the things you consistently did each day, those actions that brought you to your destination. As you did before, use a stack of index cards or a pad of sticky notes to record your thoughts. You can even tear up a piece of paper into slips. Think of the words you might hear this speaker say and write them down, one word per card. Some of the words may be the same ones that you generated for the vision statement, but add to the previous list to get more active words. The vision described a place or a destination. The words were probably more passive, words of being or position. Mission is active, and the words you use should reflect that. These words should describe a journey or a process. They should be action words. Sort the list as you did for the vision, include the words that describe the process of moving toward your vision. Prioritize the words, choosing the ones that are essential to your progress. Take the words from the top of your list, the top 10 or so, and start moving them around to make a sentence. Add other words as you need until it makes sense and describes the direction you will go to reach your vision. This is the personal mission statement. Then we go to goals. If your vision is the sunrise between mountain peaks, and if your mission is the path toward that sunrise, then the goals are mile markers along the way. They are the points you will automatically pass if you're still on the path. If you're still executing your mission, you will still work to achieve them, but they aren't unique and isolated targets. They are simply points that fit into the progress. Goals need to be achievable, measurable, and important. But more than anything else, they just show you that you're making progress on the mission. Issues will come up. An issue is anything that causes you pain or impedes your progress. Issues are current problems, things that are frustrating you now. Things that may be problems in the future are roadblocks or risks, and they'll be dealt with later. The distinction is my own, but I find it helpful to separate them in this way because they're handled differently. Issues are real. They are here now. We often ignore them, hoping somehow that they'll go away, or we avoid them, hoping that they won't get worse. But they don't go away, and they usually do get worse without our attention. So how can we deal with them? Well, I'm going to walk you through a process to identify, characterize, and prioritize issues so that you can create plans to solve them. The first step in dealing with issues is to identify them. Give yourself a few minutes and allow yourself to unload. Make a list of everything that causes you pain, frustrates you, or keeps you from moving forward toward your vision. You can list them all on one sheet of paper, or you can use small sticky notes or index cards to facilitate sorting later. Don't make any judgments at this stage. If it comes to your mind, write it down. List the big things and list little things. List things that have obvious solutions and things that you don't think could ever be solved. Don't think too much about this. Just write them all down. If you're using note cards, list only one issue on the card so that you can sort them later. If it's a major issue, it'll probably come to your mind quickly. If you have to work to think of these, they're probably not causing you all that much pain, and they probably don't really need to be on the list. Then, once you have the list, you group issues by their solvability. This is where the real power of the process comes in. Sort the individual issues into 3 categories below. The first one is I can handle it. These are things that you can handle without anyone else's help. You can do them usually fairly quickly. The second category is I can influence it. These are things that you can't solve on your own, but you do have input. There are things you can do to help. You'll need other people to help you, but you have something you can do for it. The third one is get over it. It ain't changing. Now, ironically, this may be the most important category of all. These are the issues that are completely beyond your control and about which you can do nothing. Why is it so important to identify them? You have to admit to yourself that you can't do anything about them. Most people going through this process put over half of their issues in the first category, and most of the rest of them are in the second category. Usually there are very few issues in the third category, but they are the most frustrating ones. These are the ones that make us feel helpless, and this frustration robs us of energy and keeps us from dealing with the issues that are within our control. Worrying about the things beyond your control keeps you from addressing the things that you could actually solve. Once you've put these issues in the get over it category, you can do just that. You can admit that there's nothing you can do and let them go. By giving yourself permission to drop them, you'll free yourself to focus on the issues that can actually be addressed. Now that you've identified the issues and sorted them into categories, you can decide which ones are worth your effort. It's easy for us to go into firefighting mode, smothering the scariest looking flames and moving on and never putting the fires out completely. The prioritization step lets you make a realistic decision of where to invest your time and energy. Start with the first category. It makes sense to deal with what you can actually solve. List the issues in order of priority, the order in which you think they should be solved. As you prioritize the issues, you might consider which is most important to solve, which will take the least time, which will take the least effort, etc. Sometimes a quick win is just as important as a big win. Picking low-hanging fruit can energize you to run the longer race to come. Future roadblocks are potential problems. They might happen or they might not. You might be able to take steps now that will make them less likely. So it makes sense to look closely at them now and see if you can do anything now to help to keep them from happening later. The fact that they're in the future also means you have time to put together a plan, to plan a way around them if they do happen, or at least plan your actions to mitigate their potential effects. The first step in dealing with roadblocks is to anticipate what those roadblocks might be. We have described the vision as a sunrise, the mission as the path that we're going to walk. Now picture yourself walking down that path and think about what you might encounter. A huge boulder in the middle of the road. What might that boulder look like? What are the things that might block your path in the future? List them. They may not happen, but if you take time to plan your strategy now, you'll be able to handle them if they do. I often tell people, you don't have to follow your plan, but having a plan to fall back on gives you the freedom to wing it with style. If you anticipate the roadblocks and plan for them, you can negotiate them with grace when they do appear. Once you've listed the potential roadblocks, think of anything you might do now that could keep the roadblocks from happening at all. What could you change in the way you live that would make the particular roadblock less likely? List those things and decide whether they're things you're willing to change. And then there's early warning. Look again at your list of roadblocks. And for each of them, ask yourself, if this roadblock is in my way, what's the first indication I'll have? Looking again at the visual, if you're walking down your path and you're coming around the corner and that roadblock's there, that big boulder, what's the first corner of that roadblock, of that boulder, that you would see? You won't be able to see the roadblock until you round the corner, but what's the first glimpse that you'll get of it? What will be your first indication? This is what you look for to provide the early warning of a problem to come. This is important because it will allow you to anticipate and deal with the problem before it becomes an issue. You can think, if I know what to look for, when I see that red flag, what things will I put into place to make this easier to handle? One difference between an issue and a roadblock is that roadblocks give you that time to make a plan and put it into place. Failure to make such a plan takes away the advantage and throws you into the mode of damage control. Your solution may never be enacted. You may never need it. But by formulating the plan and identifying what will trigger its execution, you have, in essence, bought a very, very valuable insurance policy. Risks. There are risks that you can't afford to take, and those that you can't afford not to. But how do you decide which they are? Paul Tillich said, "He who risks and fails can be forgiven. He who never risks and never fails is a failure in his whole being." But on the other hand, you don't want to be foolish. In the graphic, I've shown risks as a cliff that you could fall off of. You need to decide whether there's a safe path beside the cliff that you can avoid it, how high a cliff it is, whether you'll really be hurt. The first step is to decide what risks you won't take and what you're willing to risk. This isn't a perfect science, but the opportunity to collect your thoughts. For example, I used to have a classic sports car. It's a 1953 MG, and I loved that car. I valued the car, but I drove it in traffic, so I was obviously willing to risk it. Let's say I was going to lose my house. I would be willing to sell the car to get money to save my house. Obviously, I valued the house more than the car. I might still be willing to risk the house by taking out a second mortgage on a business venture. So, what am I not willing to risk? Well, I wouldn't risk the lives or safety of my family, at least not for a business venture. On the other hand, I do risk their safety when I allow them to get into a car. Life is full of danger, and you can't protect everyone or everything that is valuable. But you can evaluate risks and make reasonable decisions. The risks may be easy to understand, but if you need more analysis, you can ask yourself the following questions. What is the likelihood of this occurrence? What's the likelihood of this risk actually happening? How quickly would you recognize the problem if it occurred? Would you have time to correct? Whether you could take steps to solve the problem at that time. The severity of the problem if it did occur. The process of ranking will not make the decision for you, but it will help you understand the risks that you're contemplating. You can mitigate risks. To mitigate simply means to make less severe. When we talk about mitigating risks, we're looking at how to make them easier to handle. Less trouble down the line. And we really have two options. You can look at how to lower the likelihood of the occurrence. Can we modify our actions to lower the chances of bad things happening? Or can we look for ways to make the results less severe? The process here is virtually the same as I discussed for roadblocks. There's avoidance, finding ways to lower the chances of problems occurring. Here you're looking at the behaviors that cause the risk and determine whether you're willing to change those behaviors. There's early warning. Look for the earliest indicators that will alert you that a problem is coming. Identify the first things you'll see if this thing you fear is happening. Plan solutions. Plan what can be done when you see those indicators. If you have identified the early indicators, and if you see them, you can anticipate the problem and react quickly with steps that might not be effective if you waited until later. In summary, I've tried to introduce you to a process of creating a strategic plan and introduce you to some of the tools to help you execute that plan. But more than that, I hope I've introduced you to a new way of thinking, a new perspective on how to make choices. I hope I've encouraged you and shown you that the possibilities are perhaps much broader than you had thought.